Welcome to the CS Joseph Podcast. I'm your host for this episode, Chris Taylor, also known as Raka, bringing you another Acolyte question today. Today's question is, what is the difference between FE Aspirational and FI Demon in ISTPs? So, at a very surface level, we're talking about the difference of aspiration of ethics, or the value of others, overcoming social anxiety, versus the angel of morality, or personal value, overcoming a lack of self-worth. Now, before we get into a lot of the meat and potatoes here, let's get into the different transition types. So there is an orderly transition and a chaotic transition. When we were talking about an orderly versus a chaotic transition, what we are really referring to is we have in our function stacks two different types of functions. We have gateway functions. These are the functions that lead you into the other sides of the mind. And we have guidance functions. These are your parent, your child, your critic, and your trickster function. Now, these functions will pair up with the gateway functions that they are closest to, in order to kind of think of it like controlling the flow of the gateway. So if you are transitioning into another side of the mind and you are leading with the gateway function, and in the absence of the guidance function associated, this is more often than not going to lead into a chaotic transition. So for ISTPs, your gateway functions are your TI hero, your FE inferior, your TE nemesis, and your FI demon. So if you go into your subconscious, for example, with FE, and you're leading the FE just in terms of trying to make things fair, trying to overcome the social anxiety, but you don't have a clear idea or direction in which you want to take the situation, a la your NI child, then it is going to lead to a chaotic social situation. You're not considering entirely what you want, what outcome you want out of the social situation. Oftentimes it's, I just want X, Y, or Z thing to stop. I am worried that this is making other people uncomfortable, which is making me uncomfortable. I am worried that other people are feeling bad, or that this is awkward, things like that. And so you don't really have the NI child kind of leading there. You know what you don't want to be the case, but you're not sure what kind of outcome you are looking for. Now, on the flip side, so that's what will lead to a chaotic transition there. On the flip side, if you're leading with your NI and you're like, okay, this is the outcome that I want in this situation. Okay, now how do I make that fair for others? How do I make this experience fair for them? Then you're going to be leading more towards a controlled entrance into your, or an orderly entrance into your subconscious. Now, there's one other concept here, and that is, kind of cognitive looping, where you're bouncing between your optimistic to optimistic functions or your pessimistic to pessimistic functions. So if your TI is leading your NI and you're just going, I want this, I'm going to think about what I want, or, this is what's true, so I want it, so on and so forth, and you're just spiraling on that, and you're like the definition of tunnel vision. This is another reason that can lead to a chaotic transition. So you want these guidance functions to be pairing up with these gateway functions to kind of control the flow of the entrance to that side of the mind. Now, with with your subconscious, we're looking at the ENFJ side of the mind. FE aspirational, this is overcoming that social anxiety with an orderly transition. This is what's known as a aspirational transition, whereas the chaotic transition would be an inferior transition. So just think about it like that. Inferior transition is leading with your inferior function. Aspirational or orderly transition is actually leading with the child to dictate the amount of the inferior to apply in that transition, how far to go into that side of the mind, so to speak. Now we're comparing the subconscious versus the superego here. So ENFJ versus INFP. Now with the INFP side, so what does a disorderly or chaotic transition into FI superego actually look like? This is going to be a high level of selfishness with a disregard for the consequence it's going to have on other people. And what I mean by selfishness is not the I want from the NI child. I mean, this is the I feel. Well, if nobody's going to value me anyway, then I am just going to be on the take with my superego. It's completely about what I feel and what I think is, or what I feel is right. And so that focus and leaning on to the FI is going to, without the NE of going, well, what are the consequences of this situation, is more often than not, given that NE is your guys' trickster function, going to lead to a chaotic or demonic transition into your superego. So we are talking about NE-FI as a gateway guidance for the angelic or demonic transition versus NI-FE for the subconscious or the aspirational or the inferior transition. And NE-FI, the angelic form, is going to look like value based on consequence, or creed based on consequence. If you're actually wanting an orderly transition into the superego, it's going to come with a lot of effort, a lot of SI, a lot of TE, because you're going to have a lot of information and a lot of discipline to base your creed that you're wanting to kind of live by or develop. You're going to need a lot of TE information, data points, a lot of SI discipline. So that shadow needs to be developed. At the same time, what good is that creed to you if it's not what you even want, and if it's going to hurt other people in the end anyway? So as you can see, as we go up this list, you start to get a picture of how much your entire function stack is playing a big role in an actual true orderly transition into the superego, an angelic transition, where you actually have the creed that will avert consequence for other people. You have the morality to be able to actually help other people with their futures, and you have an understanding of what will actually happen, right, to other people based on their choices, and will be able to understand why that is wrong, why that is going to lead them down a bad path. The subconscious is a little easier because it's closer to the ego. It's not going to be as hard to get an angelic transition. Your NI child is naturally wanting to be on regardless. So when you're looking at the upper half of the mind, really it's just about trying to figure out what the outcome is in order to understand where the fairness lies. Now, there are going to be times where a chaotic transition ends up benefiting people. And this is really especially true with any trickster and I child, where it's the old adage of broken clock is right twice a day. Where no matter what you do, there is a chance that it'll still have a good outcome. It'll still have good consequence, whether you're aware of it or not. The problem is your inner child means that it's easy for you to personally navigate yourself away from those pitfalls, but it's very hard for you to navigate other people away from those pitfalls. So when you're looking at this, you really want to, well, I suppose I'll say it like this. The difference ultimately when it comes down to the inferior, the aspirational versus the demon is like I said before, a battle of ethics versus morality. What is actually good for everyone's future versus what is going to help you achieve fairness for other people or yourself. The difference is stark when it comes to what this actually looks like. Oftentimes, ISTPs walk around with no self-value whatsoever. Their value ends up being dependent on how other people end up feeling about them through FE, or how comfortable other people are through SE. Whereas an actual angelic transition into the superego can let go of that insecurity. So what you're going to end up seeing is an ISTP that is leading the way on what is actually good, because they have spent the time understanding what the potential consequences are. If you have any other further questions, drop a comment in the down below, leave a like. If you don't want to reach me on here, if you have further questions, if you felt like this didn't answer your question, you can always reach out to us over at the Discord. And we have a channel dedicated to ISTPs where you can ask questions. You can always reach out to myself directly on the Discord. That's the easiest place to get a hold of me. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.